everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Siobhan Lyons. I'm the chair of Second Generation, a political action committee that seeks to get immigrants more engaged in the political process. And historically, we focus on immigrant communities that have not fully been reflected in our political system. And so we're very excited to have you all here to talk about some issues in the upcoming elections that are very important for immigrants and for immigrant communities, and I think for the United States as a whole. We're just a few days away from the Pennsylvania primary, so I'm delighted to have this opportunity to introduce you to Anton Andrew, our most recently endorsed candidate. As most Democrats know, we only need 9 seats to flip the Pennsylvania House. And we at Second Generation are really hoping that Anton and Claudette Williams, who's another of our endorsed candidates, will be 2 of those 9. The global pandemic has highlighted many of the fractures in our society. And I think a few days before an election, it's really important to remember that the problems in our society are a choice. Our current government has let us down. And that's why at Second Generation, we support trailblazing immigrants and representatives of a more diverse America that we hope will bring new ideas to government and will help us create a more just and equal and diverse and inclusive society. So next Tuesday, let's remember to choose better. And with that, I'm going to hand over to JP, who is one of my board members, and he is going to interview Anton for us, and then we'll open it up to questions. Again, if you have any questions, please just raise your hand or speak to me in chat.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this virtual town hall hosted by Second Generation in the run-up to the Pennsylvania primary election, which of course is next Tuesday, June 2nd, and mail-in and early voting is obviously underway. My name is JP Faunis, and tonight we're joined by Anton Andrew, Democratic candidate for the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in the 168th District. Anton, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, JP. I am thrilled to be here. Also humbled to speak with you. Sorry. I saw a note from you that I'm spotlighted. Yeah, as a son of immigrants, this is a special honor because I know the sacrifices my parents made to give me the opportunity to be here. So as I was telling a group I was with earlier today, I am beyond words. I'm actually more nervous for this interview than anything I could remember in recent memory, because I think it is more important than ever to remind Americans that the people who have bought most into the American dream are immigrants. They moved themselves and started their lives over from scratch based upon the belief that if you work hard and you treat people with respect, that anything is possible. So anything I can do to reinforce that, I think is my duty and responsibility, and it is also very self-serving.
Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a very busy period for you, and obviously we have a relatively brief program, but I love it. Those are some great broad strokes about the importance of the immigrant community to the United States and to the Pennsylvania Commonwealth. Can you just give us a little bit of information, a little bit more depth about your background?
Sure. My parents came to America when I was 10 years old, and my sister was 7.5. They came from the West Indies, Jamaica and Trinidad, respectively, and they came to give us both a shot at the American dream. It certainly made life harder for them in the short run. They certainly did not have they didn't get the positions that they would have had if they were in Jamaica or Trinidad. My dad taught zoology at a college in Trinidad. My mom was a registered nurse, and both of them had to take significantly less in terms of positions when they came here. In fact, they had to take multiple positions. But that reinforced for me their confidence and their belief that we're here to do what it takes to make sure that our children have a shot at the American dream. And it made me realize really early on, that's what the American dream is about. It is not necessarily about making yourself insanely rich and that's fine, but it's also about struggling to make sure that the next generation, your kids, your progeny, have the opportunities that you didn't. And so when we came to the States, they struggled mightily to make ends meet. My sister and I worked really hard in school. I remember them just saying, just work hard and you will get those opportunities. In fact, the reason we moved to where we did on Long Island, New York, was not because it was necessarily closer to any family members, because we had certainly a lot of family members in another part of New York State, but for the school district, for the public schools, which is why that's one of the areas that I focused on with my campaign, because there is no greater engine for social mobility than our education system, which is why I think it is probably the most crucial investment we can make as a society. And then, yeah, from school, our public schools were great, which allowed me, when I worked hard, got decent grades, to go to the University of Pennsylvania, which led me to go on to Hofstra University Law School. And while there, I was at a unique time in our history when we started talking about young people as super criminals and super predators, and that sort of verbiage started to infect our thinking. And those people look like me. And so when I saw that, I remember seeing a Nightline episode. I don't know if Nightline even runs anymore. I looked at it and they were talking about these super criminals, and basically they were locking up juvenile young black males. And I knew a couple of people in my neighborhood who you're like, there, but for the grace of God, go I. I could have gone down and made a silly decision, which actually may have seemed like a sane decision at the time to make money. And I said, I got to go down there. It was nice and it was warm. I was living on Long Island, New York. Miami was definitely attractive, from a temperature standpoint, but also because they were at the focus. They were the focal point of that sort of national debate about locking up young people and treating them as predators. And so I went down to the public defender's office there, worked for several years, and went there specifically because they had what was basically at that point a one-of-a-kind program where I got to work with a cross-functional team of educators, social workers, investigators, mental health professionals, to create alternatives to incarceration for juveniles. And that experience sort of changed my life. I was like, this is something that I will always want to do, to make sure that people in these underserved communities, in these vulnerable communities, which were my community, was among them, immigrant community, that to make sure that there's somebody out there speaking up for them, because otherwise they were invisible. So went from there on to Cheyney University, which is the oldest historically black college or university in the country, and worked as the de facto chief of staff for 2 presidents there, created an incubator for women and minority businesses within the state at a time when the federal government was threatening to withhold millions of dollars in federal funding because Pennsylvania, and specifically the Department of Transportation in Pennsylvania, PennDOT, had such a terrible track record with women and minority-owned small businesses that they were threatening to withhold millions. I went around the state helping reestablish trust with those businesses, and was able to create right here in my district, or I should say on the edge of my district, in one of the counties within my district, an incubator for women and minority businesses. That led into working with the environment, and I became a teacher. And then one of my students asked me, hey, Anton, who's fighting for the people in this district? I know you've been fighting for, X number of years. Now it's been 25. Who's going to fight for the people in our district? And that ended up with a discussion with her father, who's actually thinking of running to represent this district. This is a majority white district. Black and brown people make up only about 10% of the district. which is something that's also special about my candidacy, that I have the opportunity to be only one of a handful, I believe only 3 legislators who would be minorities representing majority white districts within the state house, and said, hey, Anton, I know your passion. I've spoken to my daughter. I actually won't run if you decide to run. And so that's how I launched my campaign.
That's great. So obviously you have, over the course of your career, because of your background, you developed such a unique perspective. And I just wanted to dive into that a little bit. If you could just tell us a little bit about how, either the background that you discussed about your parents or the way that you came up, or sort of your robust experience in the criminal justice system, sure, informs your policy positions today and would be an asset to the voters in the 160.
Okay, I'll break that up into 2 parts. First, how my immigrant experience informs my thinking. It informs it in 2 ways. First, I am incredibly grateful, and I see my sisters on this call, and hey, V, thank you for coming out. And you know this, and you are the same way. She's worked hard to make sure on issues of the Caribbean diaspora from her vantage point in Washington, D.C. But there are 2 parts. First, I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to fight for others. There's a saying that I remember my parents often repeating, that as a kid you just ignore it, and now I can't get out of my head. It's like an earworm. There but for the grace of God go I. I think of all the friends, all the people I've known who went down a different track, weren't able to pursue their American dream for various reasons. And I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity that I had educators, I had friends, families in the district, people along the way who looked out for me and gave me an opportunity. And then I took advantage of the opportunity with hard work. So that's part of it, is feeling incredibly grateful for the opportunity I've had. And that sort of informed my thinking throughout. And then the second part is, I also realize, in addition to that gratitude, there is a level of trepidation. I know immigrant communities like my own, hardworking families, are the first to suffer when our society ignores the needs of all its citizens and focuses on making a very small portion of them incredibly comfortable at the expense of others. So everything I've done, from Miami to Cheyney to teaching, has all been about first ensuring that others, the next generation, have that opportunity, the way my parents did on a very direct level for us. And second, making sure, like, building structures and processes so that vulnerable communities are not as vulnerable. Basically making sure that America lives up to that ideal that my parents bought into, that, yeah, this is a meritocracy. This is a land of opportunity. So making sure that we create those opportunities and do so in a process-oriented, a structural way. Because I know, like I said, there was a lot of luck, a lot of fortuity involved in getting to me to where I am. And I don't think that should be the case. I think we all deserve an equal shot.
And you touched on a little bit there in the lead up to some of those responses about being one of a relatively small community, particularly out in the 160th. Do you think that some of the ideals that you just talked about, whether it's meritocracy or some of the other ideals, that those resonate with voters across lines, across races?
Oh, I don't think, I know. I'm in a district that's only 35% registered Democrats. I ran against a 24-year Republican incumbent back in 2018 in a district where Democrats hadn't fielded a candidate against him in 3 of the 5 prior elections. That's how much of a slam dunk this district was. I got 49% of the popular vote. that means that independents and Republicans, the people who we'll need to win this district, bought into my message of somebody who's not only going to fight and being able to fight successfully, as my track record has shown over the last 25 years, but somebody who's also going to be able to listen, who's going to respect others' opinions. I've never had the luxury of saying, hey, it's my way or the highway. I love hearing people say that, but to me that makes me laugh because I know I've always had to find allies along the way. I have never been able to say, take it or leave it. So I've had to prove to other people that whatever ideas I'm proposing also meets their basic needs. So I think that is one of the advantages of having being an immigrant, having been an outsider, is that I've always had to seek allies even when they weren't obvious. And I think the Republicans and independents in our community appreciate it. They look at the issues that I've fought about. We all want clean air and water. We all want our kids to have a shot at the American dream. We all want to make sure that our young people have the tools that they need to pursue the American dream. And those are the things that I've been fighting for. And those are the things I've fought for under Republican and Democratic administrations, not just in the district, but in Miami as well. And those are the things that I've successfully fought for. So I think it absolutely resonates with people in the district because anybody, to be honest, can identify a problem and it's super easy to point a finger at somebody else. But unless you're willing to listen to them, unless you're willing to get past the sort of political maneuvering, which is just stating your position and setting yourself up for your next campaign run, unless you're able to get to the point where you're listening to the genuine needs that sort of are under that, you're not getting anything done. You're just talking a lot and saying nothing.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, particularly with respect to sort of the divisive nature of national politics, the way you just sort of referenced it. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about something that's basically the opposite of that. It seems that among Democrats that are running, not just here in Southeast Pennsylvania, but around the country, there's a lot of overlap in terms of issues and when people are talking about policy positions they support. There seems to be a lot of agreement. What is it that you see as separating? What separates you from your challenger? What separates you from other Democrats?
I think what separates me from my challenger and challengers on both sides of the political spectrum is I've always had to speak truth to power. Again, because I feel like I'm on thin ice. I don't have the luxury of waiting. So I have not shied away from being outspoken about national politics. I have been very forthright in criticizing the president with regard to his go home comments. Those felt deeply personal to me. I remember in 5th grade, as a bully told me the same thing. And I know I need to know that the leaders in my community don't sign off on that sort of stuff. And so I went to my local township supervisors and my local borough council and said, we need to speak out against this kind of language that's coming out of the White House because it's infecting our schools. It's in our backyards already. You may not necessarily be feeling it, but I can guarantee you our immigrant population, and we have a large immigrant population, especially in the agriculture and specifically in the mushroom industry, which Kennett Square area is famous for, that they need to know, as I would have wanted to know when I was a young person, that this is unacceptable and my leaders have my back on this. That caused me to get a lot of pushback. I was surprised. I wasn't surprised that I got it from Republicans, but even Democrats were telling me, hey, Anton, stay in your lane. This is too hot to handle right now. Let's move away. And I called them out for it. I said, no, we have an obligation and we have an opportunity to stand up for our shared values. It may have not been the politically expedient thing to do, but again, it was the right thing to do. And in light of my immigrant experience where my parents had always done the right thing, regardless of the consequences, it was an easy decision for me to make. That said, it's sort of manifested itself in many ways. I look a resolution that I had put forward in terms of our local borough recognizing or inviting refugees into our community, per Donald Trump's creating that additional step where local communities had to re-invite refugees into their communities once they passed already all those threshold standards that were much higher than a regular citizen to be a part of the community. I said, yeah, let's invite them in. In January, I pushed for that. And last week, they did. I was thrilled. I felt, I am so glad that this issue is now ripe. But at that time, it wasn't. Similarly with gun violence, I remember pushing every single municipality within my district, the 160th district, to pass a resolution asking Harrisburg, because in Pennsylvania, basically our state government has preempted our local governments and said, you can't make any specific common sense gun safety regulations. That's entirely within our purview. I said, okay, well then let's say, hey, you're in Harrisburg, you've tied our hands, it's time for you to act. Again, got a lot of pushback. But without that sort of raising the issue, creating that narrative, I don't think I would have been at the table with senior administration officials within Governor Wolf's cabinet in the last year, including Secretary of Health Levine and our Auditor General Eugene D. Pasquale, which ultimately resulted in the governor passing an executive order to help reduce gun violence in our state. So again, may not have been the easy thing to do, may have been a politically costly thing to do if you want to say that it makes other politicians uncomfortable and potential allies queasy, but it is the right thing to do. And again, what our job is to serve our communities, and people in our communities, especially the most vulnerable, are looking for leaders who are going to stand up for them, regardless of whether or not it keeps that person in power.
Makes a lot of sense. I have so many things I want to ask you about that, and I really enjoy speaking with you, but I have to, we're so lucky to have a VIP, a second generation alumnus with us here, a friend of yours I know, the Chester County Prothonotary. Debbie Bookman is with us tonight, and I know that she's dying to ask you a question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Hey, Deb.
Money. Hi, I am really honored to be here tonight to speak on behalf of my friend, Anton Andrews. I'm very grateful that he is now a part of this family. I was honored and proud to refer him because Anton definitely holds the values that this organization represents. I know what the endorsement meant to me when I received it from this organization. Coming into this race, and it's so interesting watching you and just reflecting on last year, I was in this same spot and how I felt and all of the emotions. So I can definitely, relate to how you feel. It's just, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to affect change. And I know that Anton is going to do a phenomenal job. This is his second time around. The stakes are a little bit higher, but he has a lot more of an advantage. And I was just wondering, Anton, this is probably something that the board might ask you, but what does it feel like to be a part of the second generation family? As someone, so much of what you're saying is it sounded like you were speaking my life. Having parents, my dad was a pilot that became a minister. My mom was a nurse, and how hard they worked for the four of us, my brothers and sisters, to give us a better life. Both of them grew up poor with 9 brothers and sisters. My dad had 8 brothers and sisters. They had to share shoes for school. Yeah. They walked and they farmed, and everything that they ate, and sometimes it was just boiled potatoes that their parents were able to give them. But because of them coming here, it afforded us the opportunity to not only work hard, but appreciate everything that we have and to share and to give back. My saying that my dad always told us was, to whom much is given, much is required. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be in this role and to be able to serve and to give back to the community and to shed hope that other Black and brown people will see, you know what, it happened to Debbie. Debbie, I'm just a regular person. And I am in a position to truly affect change. And this is just the beginning. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm grateful for it. So I'm just curious to know, how do you feel to now be a part of this VIP circle?
Well, first, let me say my connection to this family came through you. I saw you at a meeting with my local Democratic committee. And I remember going over and giving you a hug at the end. And I remember just feeling like for the first time, and I love my Democratic committee. They've been incredibly welcoming for me. The fact that I am a minority candidate in a majority white district that came so close to beating a popular 24-year incumbent speaks to how hard they've worked for me. And yet, it wasn't until I saw you in that room where I felt I can bring all of me to this campaign. So it feels great to be a part of a family where I'm recognized and valued for the fact that I am different. Not that I have to try to be the same, but that I am different. I also think, and a huge part of this, and what I embrace the idea of, is we're role models. I can't believe that in the 21st century, we're still role models, but we are. You know, my parents came from Jamaica and Trinidad, where, you know, everybody from the street sweeper to the prime minister to the president were all people of color. We're all people. We never questioned that we were equal in every way to other people, other cultures across the world. And I think that's something in this country. I remember when I got here in 5th grade, I was in a class and the teacher said, "Hey, Anton, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, I want to be a lawyer or maybe even a politician. I hear they help people. The whole class started laughing. And a friend of mine came up to me during lunch that day. One of the other few Black students in my class said, "What the hell are you saying? Nobody knows any Black politicians. Nobody knows any Black lawyers." And I was like, "And you said you wanted to be the Black Bjorn Borg?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? Who has a better chance?" And so, like, what I'm saying is, it looks like for so many of our young people that getting from where they are to being in a position where they can be advocates or let alone representatives for their community seems something that's impossible. I love the fact that we have a family here in second generation that says it's not. It says, in fact, we'll support you along that quest. And little things like seeing Deb Bookman in a room, the way it sort of relaunched me into my 2020 campaign, it's hard to quantify. So I look forward to being a role model. I look forward to also modeling the sort of skills that I've had to learn as a minority, as an immigrant, as a person who's sort of historically disenfranchised, where I have to make alliances with people who are not normally allies. But that is the only way I'm going to get my needs met. I think too many legislators basically say it's all or nothing. And they can say that because they come from a position of power. Fighting for the people is not about getting what you want. It's about getting what your constituents need. And I've always had to fight from that sort of perspective. So I am thrilled to be a part of a family that reinforces that, and also a family, especially at this moment in history, when we have a national leader who has built his presidency largely on taking target at vulnerable communities. It's time that we end that. It's time we remind America who and what truly made America great. And those are the immigrants who've come to this country from the time before this country was the United States of America, and have made it a great country.
Thanks so much for that, Anton. We actually are out of time, but I think that's such an appropriate place to close and closing message. And obviously, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on the endorsement from Second Generation. Good luck in the primary. And thank you to everyone on the call who could join and everyone who's watching. Please be sure to get out and vote. And of course, if you believe, as we do, that immigration, and diversity, and representation in politics is important, please consider donating to Second Generation and Equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, JP, Shaban. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you for everybody who came out this evening. I am looking forward to your support, looking forward to getting across the finish line, looking forward to being a role model, not only for the young people in our district, but for the elected officials in the district in terms of what it means to be a public servant, somebody who will fight for the public. Thank you.